Okay, we are live on YouTube, and ladies
Great.
and gentlemen, we will be, I, I will introduce our two presenters today, who are Colleen Kibert and Tim Holmes. And Tim is going to lead the moderation today. So Tim, go for it.
Okay. Well, thanks for everybody for showing up for this. This is a really exciting kind of extension of the Confluence that we've been doing the last couple of years. And our purposes are, first of all, to establish or to reestablish this pretty intimate community that we've created, and to use this community to sort of go forward in our original intention, which is to unfold the power of the healing power of the unconscious that resides within each one of us. And so to do that, we're going to use this idea that we've used before of the fishbowl, where you have a few people having an intimate conversation among themselves. In this case, it'll be the 6 presenters, and everybody who's attending is in a kind of an outer circle listening to this exchange. And if you want to address something, let Wally know in the chat, and we will kind of open it up at the end for a Q&A and sort of a group processing moment. We've designed 2 sessions for this weekend, today and tomorrow. This one is so that the presenters can have this conversation, and we can kind of model this fishbowl idea for everybody, and to share some of the creative work that we've been doing. And then tomorrow, some of the people in the outer circle can share any creative project that we're thinking about. Hopefully we'll go 90 minutes. We've carved out 2 hours today. So when we get toward the end, if people need to leave, that's fine. Don't feel embarrassed or anything. But we do hope you'll come back tomorrow. And then we're scheduling a series of these Zoom calls over the next few months, mostly to address the fact that trying to do an in-person Confluence like we've done the last couple of years, although it's fabulous for the intimacy of the group, it's just so expensive, and it's hard for us to concentrate on filling so many seats in order to secure the venue and things like that. It just becomes so cumbersome. And we want to have a group that is dynamic and is able to expand as much as possible, because in our time, I feel like, these are very troubling times, and capitalist values are wringing all the fat out of all of our systems: the natural environment, civic trust, economic systems, the social imaginations, even politeness, even basic aspects of life like personal choice or interpersonal relationships, the quality of meaning, awareness of beauty in the world. All of these things are being inundated by this kind of cheap commercial and transactional values that are kind of assaulting us from the culture. Materialism just swamps and delegitimizes our deep spiritual longings. To me, the demise of religion across the world is a terrible thing. And yes, the institutions of the church have done terrible, horrendous things in history, and we can't ignore that. But that's largely because of the same problem we're having now, that the church leaders have used the institution as precisely what Jesus warned against, making it a kingdom of this world rather than a kingdom of the next world or the other world. And because the church leaders used the church in that way, religion has kind of become a bit of a disease, unfortunately. But it also provides, I think, the only uplifting force to human aspirations, lifting the spirit away from the simple base desires of our animal nature. Jung has said that the only placement for religion is religion. And it seems like the developed West has replaced true religion with just capitalist triumph, which of course only includes the very few at the top, while the rest of us just sort of indulge our basest desires. So we're all caught up in this downward pull of a culture in decline, encouraged to exercise our basest desires and nothing else. And we all have to struggle against that gravity. The honorable social values of our forebears that were painfully constructed over centuries, like good taste and kindness, spiritual health, deep thoughtfulness. These are all being eroded by the careless draw of the immediate, the literal, the spectacular, just drawn by whatever base desires that can be dangled in front of us like a lure. And Trump is a perfect example of that. He's masterful at that. So we are charged with trying to counteract that regressive downward pull. And as we've been talking about in the Confluence previously, it is the power of the personal unconscious that is going to draw humanity forward. It's always just the single creative impulse of one person that draws the culture forward. And that creative power, each one of us carries as a basic human right. It can't be taken away or abrogated. And in these chaotic times, as we watch so much threatening change, here we gather to affirm one another's creative work, whatever that might be, because it's really a bulwark against this kind of tsunami of authoritarianism and kind of me-firstism that is so popular in the culture right now. So those of us in the inner circle are going to be sharing some images or poetry or some kind of creative work. And the intent here is not so much to focus on the material aspect of the creative work. Now, as a professional artist, I spend my whole life making objects and then trying to sell those to people. And, blowing my own horn, telling people what a fabulous artist I am. And that's not what this is about. It's about doing whatever creative work you are called to and just sharing that with each other, just to say, this is what's coming out of me. This is what I am unfolding out of my own creative unconscious. And if we can affirm and share non-judgmentally those ideas with each other, not to say, oh, I think that composition could use a little help or whatever. It's not to critique the quality of the creative work, but just to celebrate the fact that this is a gift that all of us are endowed with. And it's precisely this kind of thing that is the most powerful weapon against autocracy. And we can see this all through history, like in Russia, where even today, it's the cultural institutions that Russia is attacking in Ukraine. Not just the soldiers in the trenches, but the theaters and the hospitals and the schools. And as I mentioned in our group a couple of weeks ago when we met at Colleen's, recently DeSantis in Florida just defunded the arts just on his own. The arts all over the state. So every institution that got public funding suddenly at the beginning of July had their funds cut off. And this is the kind of thing that terrifies us, particularly artists like myself. And we have the chance to respond to that by celebrating the fact that nobody can take away our creative power. So that's kind of the focus here. I'll shut up and let Colleen carry on. But thank you so much for being a part of this. And I really hope that we will continue and that you'll invite others. Go ahead, Colleen.
Thank you. Thank you, Tim. So well put. Thank you so much. You say it so well. I think in particular, the way the autocracy, the authoritarian rule is taking away, as you mentioned, the funding, $32 million in the state of Florida without any explanation, without any forewarning. Overnight, it happened. Within 24 hours, it was gone. So it's quite an example of what is happening. And because of that, museums are suffering all over the country. So we took some action here in Santa Cruz. The group of people that work in my studio work with the purpose of expressing their individual voice. And we express our individual voice, but what is the connection? What does this have to do with a time when the individual is meant to feel helpless, is meant to feel helpless? It doesn't have to be that way. So we took responsibility ourselves to make the statement for the individual voice. We went to the Museum of Santa Cruz County Museum of Art and History, and we bought the room. We rented the space ourselves. Our museum is in trouble, just like the rest of the museums. We don't wait to be invited or hope that we'll be curated in. We said we want to rent this room from you at your most active time, your first Friday of the month, when so many people come, and the town is alive on first Fridays in our county. And in many other counties now, this is caught on. And so we rented the room, and 11 of us showed. And next month, there will be, I think, 14 of us showing. And 500 people showed up for our weekend pop-up. And I'm so proud of what happened. It worked. It worked. People came in. Each artist had a pedestal, showed one work that was expressive of their individual voice. That's what's being threatened, because, you know, if you have too many individual voices speaking up, that's just one of the major steps of the road to anarchy, and we can't have that. So that's what we did. And each artist made a statement about what their piece meant to them and why they believe that it makes a connection. And it was interesting when you looked at all of those statements, how many of the artists, I think all of them, referred to something that had happened in the world that inspired them to do this work. It was because of the pandemic, or it was because of the election, or it was because of something that's happening in Gaza, that something was ignited within personally. And so we also made a point of the work not being for sale. We weren't asking anything of people except to just come and be influenced by what happened. And so, as I said, 500 people came and they read. They looked and they read. It was very exciting. Wallace, would you show the announcement that we had for it? And the museum let us use their mailing list to announce the show, and
Skip,
their
I
newsletter
sent
that they
the,
send out.
I'm sorry, Mom. Skip, I sent the image to you. Screen sharing is shut off for me. If you want to share it, Skip. You're on mute.
Yep. Just a minute. I'll set you for screen sharing, Wallace.
Okay.
Let's see.
I wanted
Sorry,
to show the announcement
Okay,
because
now.
people commented on how the announcement, one man came up to me and said, especially that last line on the announcement. So the artist statement is, these ceramic sculptures are manifested from our personal unconscious. This manner of engagement is a means for the individual to influence the great, my camera's in the way, the great collective of our culture towards a more creative, free, and conscious peace, a conscious peace, a peace that we feel like we're a part of making happen. And the image of course, is Eve and the apple, raising consciousness in the human being. Thanks, Wallace. So that's what's happening here in Santa Cruz County right now, and we're hoping it'll inspire some of the rest of you to do something similar in terms of showing what it is that you're doing as an individual. And of course, this format is one for you to do that. So we're going to be showing what's been happening amongst our group that started the Confluence to begin with, and then amongst those of you who have attended the Confluence in the last 2 years that we've done this. And now this is another version of it. And this will be a format for everyone to have this opportunity. Thank you. Thank you for coming forth. So shall we continue, please, Skip?
Yeah. So, Tim, I do have your piece teed up if you want me to show it.
Okay. I'll go ahead and start, and we'll just go around and share the creative work of each of the organizers.
Okay.
Give you a sense of how this will unfold in the future.
Share. Okay, so
this is a
Tim's
painting that I did maybe three or 4 months ago, called Into the Wild Night. And one of the artists that has always really inspired me is Albert Pinkham Ryder, who was active right about the turn of the century, an American artist, very strange guy that I very much admire, and I share a lot of working principles with him. This is a guy that he made a lot of really dark, very thick paintings that are not standing the test of time. They're falling apart. You know, he would sometimes just pour tar or oil on his paintings so that they were just goopy with medium, and let it dry for a couple of months, and then he'd like pour hot water over it and just things like that. Totally disrespectful of the material, but the paintings he created are so full of power and meaning. And you look at them and they're kind of amateurish as far as drawing and realism goes. But I am just fascinated with how he is able to capture this sense of mystery. So this was kind of inspired by kind of the look of some of his paintings. I've been doing, ever since COVID, I've been doing a lot of paintings about the sea and sea storms and the danger of human beings trying to ride the top of the water, which is a world where we will not survive on our own without some kind of flotation. And it takes a great deal of courage to launch off into that. And in this image, you know, the sky is extremely dynamic, and you've got these bizarre dark clouds that seem threatening, but are unknown in a way. And I don't know if you can zoom in on the boat, but in the back of the boat is one little skinny guy pushing this boat off into the waves, which is very much how I feel I am at the moment. You know, this is a very threatening world. There's all of this, these catastrophes unfolding at the same time. It feels like I don't know if the human race is going to survive after my own generation, which is terribly frightening. And yet, here I am pushing my boat out into the sea as if, okay, I'm going to do what I can with the little strength I have. Into the wild night is a kind of a spiritual quest for me. There are no landmarks once you leave the shore. All you have is kind of your own faith, and you put yourself at the mercy of the forces of the world. And this very much to me describes what we are facing at the moment.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. You know, Tim,
Thank
I
you,
noticed
Tim.
that you often use the boat with this little skinny guy crashing into the waves. I've seen other paintings of yours where you where this has become the symbol, seems to me, for you to express your individual self amongst all that is happening, but very much there, very much there.
Well, thank you.
Yeah.
Right.
All right.
And other
Well,
comments?
if there are no comments, we can go on to Colleen, maybe.
I do have one.
Oh, okay.
Which is, for me, this symbolizes also the fact that, you know, the universe has a lot of laws, but we don't know where those laws came from. And the scientific method has been wonderful in the sense that it describes what the laws do, what the rules are of any given thing, but for example, how a boat floats, and why it's weight in tonnage, and that tonnage is the weight of the water that it displaces, which pushes it up to the top of the. Could everybody could everyone mute, please, if you haven't muted? Okay. So we all know how a boat floats, but we don't know who put that rule in place or how that rule got in place, and the scientific method doesn't tell us. And so really the whole universe is like that, in a way that we are floating on a pile of rules that we don't know where they came from, actually. And we can describe what the rules are down to a fairly well in the scientific method, but we don't know where the rules came from, and so on. And so that's a very significant point that I wanted to make about Tim's piece here. It's very important.
I like that, how it those rules come through the artist, you know, anyway, whether we understand them or not.
Yeah, Judith has a point. Judith, please unmute.
Yeah, Tim, for me, this is a radical discontinuity of with all your other paintings, and to me, it takes a leap off into magnificence.
Discontinuity, how's that, do you see?
It just visually looks different.
Oh,
so visually different than anything you may have done this before, than anything that I've ever seen. And for me, it takes me, I'm just going to say, a more cosmic place.
Great.
Takes it both for me is grounded in the physical reality, which and the beauty of physical reality, which is part of your other paintings. But to me, it allows so much space for the imagination to take a leap somewhere.
Yeah, it's
Great.
wonderful.
Thanks.
I love the notion about pushing the boat out. It's an expression we use in England, and you're in English. and you are pushing the boat out, Tim, which is a wonderful thing. I also love Van Gogh's Starry Nights in the Sky, which are dancing around with that dark shadow.
Mm. And that sense of pushing the boat out, I think most of us have had that experience. It's like you have to make a decision to do it. It doesn't just go out on its own. You have to give it that push, knowing this is what I'm going to do, even though I don't know what's in that wave, what's going to happen as a result of this, but that pushing it out, that decision to engage. Thank you. That's a good point, I think.
Right.
You're literally at the boat's back.
Say that again.
Could you say a little more about that?
You're at the boat's back.
Yeah.
Like your personal unconscious is coming through, but you're also going into the vastness of all of the unconscious, the great vastness of it all.
Yeah.
So
yeah, I'm glad you brought up the unconscious, because of course in Jungian symbology, water is the symbol of the unconscious, and particularly the ocean, because it's bottomless and scary.
Mm-hmm.
And we not only get our nourishment from the sea, it was our inception biologically, but it's also a really dangerous place where there's sharks and whatnot down there.
And the inside of your boat is all black. It's all dark. We have to take that with us, that Jung talks about the emptiness that we have to face within, that how dark that emptiness can feel. And yet it has form.
That's
Okay, and just I'll quickly make note of one comment here. Kathy Kerr says, there is one hammer and we are all in the one coffin. They've had us duped for years now that the two parties differ. We need to stick together. Okay, absolutely.
Right. Nice comment.
All right, yeah, we'll pick up some more YouTube comments as we go. But so Sherry, do you want to go next? So Sherry Leveler is one of our organizers of the original Confluences, and so,
I have her image. If you can let me share.
Okay, you should have it already because but let me just.
No, it says it's
okay. I'll set it up again. I thought I set it up originally, but okay. All right. So you're both co-hosts now.
Okay.
This is Sherry's image.
Can you just get my image up?
That is just your image that I have up.
Oh, I'm seeing all four, and I'm seeing all yours.
You have the full
mine.
desktop.
What?
We're seeing 4 images here.
I think if you double click on that one, it'll.
I did, and that I'm seeing it as a whole.
I'm not.
No, I'm seeing 4 images and 2 poems, 2 copies of The Crusader.
Right, and I have it open on the screen, but it's not sharing.
Yeah, sometimes when you're sharing, you have to make sure that you're clicking on the right window when you choose sharing.
There's probably a
It's like
full screen window.
You're showing your desktop and not the image itself.
Let me see if I could do it.
Let me try this and see what happens. How about this?
There we go. All right. That's the one.
Yes, that's
Great,
the one.
Sherry. Wonderful.
So this was, I have to say, kind of a collective energy piece. I was demonstrating at the Sebastopol Center for the Arts. I'm teaching a class called Painting Poetry, and I was doing a little demonstration of my work. And so I had a bunch of people around me, maybe a dozen people, and this was the 4th of my demonstration. So I was already loosened up already. And I did that black mark going across and some other things. And then I kind of asked the audience, like, what next? And someone said, use yellow. And I don't often use yellow, but I took that suggestion and I put a whole bunch of yellow in there. And then there was a band playing. I just went with the calligraphic mark and kind of danced to the music. And I actually started dancing. And so it was a fun piece to do. Not totally sure if it's finished, but I don't know yet. I just did this a couple weeks ago. And so it feels like I'm entering, I hope I'm entering a phase of where my body works more with the painting, with the brush. Because I've been doing, many of you have seen some of my little 4x3 inch paintings, which I've been framing and selling actually, that were part of a daily practice in a little book that I made. So I think the craving from painting so small to trying to go larger is a fun thing. So this was on a full sheet of paper, which is around 20 by 30 inches. It is cropped a little bit. Some of the white space I took out.
Oh, Sherry, what would be the title of this piece?
That I don't know yet. We could add the collective into that one. Maybe something like letting go. It just felt like a freeing piece for me, and kind of in a transition where you don't know where you're really going, or maybe this is the transition. I don't know. I hadn't been painting very much lately, so it felt really good to just take out my paints and to do it in front of an audience, which is, an interesting thing to do.
Yeah, it's an improvisation.
It definitely is. Yeah.
How did the red find its way into the painting?
I'd have to remember the order of it, but I think it was a balance from the yellow, but I'm not sure which came first, but it looks like the yellow came first, and then I needed another color to work with that.
Sherry, one thing I've always appreciated about your work is your strokes are so confident and so smooth. And in teaching drawing, that's one of the hardest things to do, to teach somebody to just use your body to make the stroke. Because most people just kind of tighten up on the end of their instrument and they, try to make it perfect. And of course it looks overworked, but these are so beautiful and so organic. I just love it.
Thank you.
Tim, that reminds me of a music teacher I had once in the past, that one day he just stopped, put his baton down. He looked at all of us in the group and he said, please, 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 if you're going to make a mistake, make a loud mistake. Exactly that same thing, the boldness of strokes. It's the only way that you ever learn.
Yeah, this is really just, I have confidence with the brush, and it's also a brush that I don't have a lot of control over. It was about 1.5 inches long brush part of it, and the hair's a goat brush, half goat, half synthetic. And it's just kind of playing with it, and you become the brush, and you become the music, and let it flow. And yes, so there's no stopping. I mean, once you stop and think of what is my next stroke, you don't have it unless you can really stop and focus and then do it. But this was done very fast. I think it's the speed. It's working from the heart. So it's not just the arm, it's the heart movement.
Sherry?
I was so glad, John.
I'm curious about when the brown came in at the bottom, middle.
Yeah.
It's such a stabilizing gesture there.
That's what it was meant for. That came later on because I need something stable to it. It might have come before the yellow. That part I don't know. But all the black is, not the final black strokes, but the main, that big swash going across and that some of those strokes underneath it came first. But yes, I definitely, because I think about contrast. when I'm doing something like this. If it was all floaty, you'd kind of fly away with it. You know, we need some groundedness. So I work with that idea of grounding it. And yeah, even with the browning, grounding it, that brought some earth tone to it.
You mentioned painting to poetry. Is this inspired by a poem, or did a poem come out of this?
A poem has not yet come out of it. It might. It was not inspired by a poem. It was inspired by being present in this space, and those black calligraphic marks, that all came from the music. So it was inspired by the music that was playing outside.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I was so glad John went to music, because it looks, especially at the top, looks so musical to me, and it almost looks like that conductor that John was talking about conducting the symphony.
Right. Mm-hmm. Well, maybe I was conducting the brush.
I'm sure you were.
Yeah. Yeah.
And Sherry is an incredibly talented poet also. And I actually wanted Sherry to join the group before I wanted John to join it, but I had to invite John to get him to get Sherry to join us.
Well, thank you, Skip, for that, because I did do that one of the wisdom talks, and it was so delightful to do, and launched me into this whole program with Creators Art. So it's been a wonderful path.
Would you mention the name of your book?
Yes, On Softer Ground.
On Softer Ground, yes.
Yes, and it's available through me through artandpoetry.com.
Right.
And then just a second on this piece that's up here. This is one of my 4x3-inch paintings, scanned in at a very high resolution and blown up to 16x12. So I've been really playing with that to see how the size works, and I'm really pleased with how it looks.
Great. Okay. There. Okay. Okay, John, are you ready to go?
Well, I could give it a try, sure. See if I can do it properly here. That's Jerry. I'm in that same folder, but hang on a second. Now I've got Sherry up, but I've lost. Hang on a second while I have to close her and do that. Okay. Sorry for this delay. No, it's closed to my. Why don't you try somebody else and I'll get set up.
Okay, Judith, are you ready to show a piece?
I'm ready to read my piece.
Good.
Oh, okay.
You're a good reader.
I just want to start with this quote by G.K. Chesterton, who once wrote, "Your religion is not the church you belong to, but the cosmos you live inside of." This is a quote from Richard Rohr. The entire physical world around it, and this is, I believe this with all my heart. The physical world, entire physical world around us, all of creation, and he means every single particle from the beginning of time, is both the hiding place and the revelation place for God. So in taking one of Colleen's classes, almost everybody in the whole class, is why I think it's an unconscious element, was dealing with snakes. Everybody had a snake image. And I had a snake image. I had written a poem called This Troublesome Snake. And one of the things that we learned from Colleen is to progress an image. And so in another one of her classes, I decided to do a verbal doodle. Anybody who's worked with Colleen and done doodles, I thought, well, I'm going to do a verbal doodle. One of those important conversations is what it's called. What I love about Eve is that she never, that I know of, cooked breakfast for that husband of hers, that animated lump of clay, so much like her own clay, Adam, Earthman, human being. She was just too awed by the earth itself, by trees and fruit and dates and pomegranates that were better than anything she could cook up anyway. Everywhere, all she could see was the phantasmagorical jumble, the designs in the dust. And then there was the curving color of a sensuous snake that beckoned her as it rubbed its ticklish belly over the drumming of the ground. Eve was all ears when her own inner drumming began to follow her swishing, braceleted feet, and she sensed that someone was dancing with her in the cool of the day in the garden. You can see, said a voice like music, only the abundance I so love to bestow, rain and wind and food, and you may eat. Oh, please eat of every tree that you can see but one. There must be some wilderness left untouched, a sacred tree, some mystery you may not approach, a little climate left unchanged, a place for beauty to blossom, a place for you to sit in vulnerable reverence. So she sat by that tree and under it, and she got very hungry, stubbornly hungry. And the snake with her was hungry too. And they were right there under that wilderness tree. And they were supposed to leave alone, but they were belly achingly hungry. And so they did eat. Hunger is force. They could not resist that fruit. And so did Adam eat too, saying he didn't like to make breakfast either, except on Wednesdays. And it was so good. That fruit was so delicious. They forgot they were stark naked as jaybirds. And who cared? Anyway, in this garden of quantum particles and primordial swooshes. It was then the voice interrupted, oops, there's no way back. Flaming swords will block your way. So when you get outside of the garden, I recommend you take a moment to thank your lucky stars that you have all the moxie you will need. And you'll need a lot of moxie out there. And it was my own voice that was calling, the great mysterious, the spirit of the depths, and my own voice.
Thank you, Judith. Wow, beautiful.
Thank you.
Beautiful.
What a gift.
Yeah.
What a gift.
So comments on Judith's poetry.
Boy, I love the attitude.
I love.
It's just so full of wonder. And that's something that is sorely lacking, I think, in our surroundings for the most part. Thank you for just bringing up all those different aspects of it.
How
I
do you feel about the poem, Judith? How do you feel having written the poem? How do you feel about it?
Well, I feel satisfied because for a long time I feel like the snake has gotten a really bum rap.
Yeah.
Because the snake to me represents the closest we can get to Earth in this time of incredible threat that we're experiencing. I think when you really get the threat, you get the wonder of it all. A friend of mine was just gave some money and made a video about it to to the Graduate Theological Union, and she said she was giving the money because she wanted it to exist. And then she said, and she began crying. You know, she said, existence is so close to non-existence.
Oh,
And I think when you really get how close we are to non-existence, Brian McLaren in his book Life After Doom wrote, send in the poets.
yeah.
With events, send in the artists, send
Yeah,
in the
don't send in the
poets,
clowns, send in the poets and the artists.
Yeah. Beautiful.
send
Absolutely.
in the artists would be better, but he was an English teacher, so he said send in the poets, and I have to say I kind of like that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I do too. I do too.
Judith,
Just beautiful.
since Colleen's work is all about the creative process, I wonder if you'd say something about the creative process here that you underwent.
Well, the first thing that struck me is because one of the things I've struggled with in Colleen's class is that usually, like when I write a poem like this, it's usually because I'm grasped or I'm seized by something. It says, stop the car this minute, grab that napkin, write something. And unless I have something that ferocious or a line comes into my head, I usually don't write. But in this, I said, and Colleen talks about how important intention is, a statement of intention. And I said, I am going to write a verbal doodle.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And I have no clue how to do that, but I'm just going to leap off and do that. And I didn't have any real idea where I was going to go, so I progressed the snake image and went with the flow. But what I mostly, I work so hard. I'm trying to get people to take more liberties with the images in the biblical tradition and think of them as open and as wonderful as the Buddhist traditions that become visual, and we can come to Native American traditions. We can come to them open, not closed. And so that was satisfying to me too, to just do that, to just say, I'm going to say the snake is something that religion doesn't say it is, and ha ha ha.
That wonderful, that wonderful image of the belly on the earth, picking up the drum of the earth, and how that kind of realization about what's really going on, that the snake knows, and that we have to tune in to that ourselves as Eve does. It's I think it's so beautifully said. And your poem does unravel like a doodle unravels. The story unravels, the snake unravels. It all comes out like that. It's such an example of how the creative process lays itself out. You give us the imagery to play with, and then you take us for a ride.
Well,
You take
and
us
you
for a
talk
ride, and we
about
know what.
you talk about researching your images and things like that. You can see there's a lot of research and
Yes.
years of learning and pondering closely those images. So I think all of that is embedded in the piece behind it. But so anyway, I feel good about this one, and I don't say that easily, Colleen, as you
Yeah,
know.
I know you don't. Yeah, I know that you don't. I wish that I heard more and more and more of this. I've asked you for more, please more published. It's so beautiful what you have to say. And then there is the way you say it too. You so fully embody it with your voice when you share it with us. I really appreciate that part of it too. But the words themselves can stand on their own, and I think that visual artists ask themselves the same thing. Can this painting stand on its own, or do I have to be there to explain it? Can this sculpture stand on its own? And your poem can stand on its own. And I want to also re-emphasize what you said about we don't play enough with the symbols of the Bible, the symbols that have been given to us, the snake, the apple, the tree, Adam and Eve. We don't play with those enough. And now at least 2 states have said, there shall be these 10 commandments posted in every classroom, as though this is all you need to know, but we want to encourage, our children to play with the snake, play with the apple. What's going on there? And so I love that about it. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
It's really a gift.
Thank you.
I also think
response.
that, Judith, I love the way that you bring up the aspect of hunger in the snake and in Eve, the physical hunger, which distinguishes them as mortal, and that a mortal yearning is it's also mirroring intellectual curiosity or curiosity about something that's forbidden. And so there's a way in which the hunger points out the flaw in humans that can't resist knowing.
Yeah.
Right. And
I want to, before we go on, I want to also point out how the creative process has unfolded in this particular presentation. Maybe we might do this throughout more often, but you told us what you were going to do and shared your statement of intention with us. You pull over you stop the car. You're going to do this. You're going to, as you said, and you know it now, write a poem about the doodle and let it unfold that way. And then you give us, we enter into gathering where you give us the images that we're going to play with. And then we move on to intimidation, where you begin to make the connection between these images, and the whole poem comes out in illumination, in a numinosum. We're all with you in this peak experience as the whole thing comes out. And then when you were finished, there's this moment of silence, where of reverence. And then we begin to talk about the poem itself. And now there's your experience of sharing it, and the final verification of the whole process. You've shared it with us, and we're sharing back. And this is the creative process in its completion. It's such a good example. Thank you.
And I was going to call on Brendan Walls, but I think he has dropped
I'm
out.
still here.
Oh, you are?
I'm still here.
There
I
you
just
go.
wanted
Go ahead,
to
Brendan.
echo Janice's wonderful point. I didn't realize that fantastic thing you just said about longing, about God, the God of a complete abundance, giving, overwhelming abundance, but you may not have this, and how necessary it's for us. If we all as creators didn't have that longing, that need for just one more thing, where would we be? We wouldn't create. If we were filled with that total abundance. So often it's portrayed as obedience to God, but in fact, it's filling us with that last iota. It's giving us longing, giving us something to fulfill. And I love that image. Thank you. Thank you.
Beautiful.
Great.
I was hoping too people would hear, you may eat of every tree.
Yes.
You may eat of every tree. Oh, please eat but one. And so then the question becomes, why would there be any limitation on any? And, you know, especially in view of human greed, and we see what it's done to the creation, the invitation to consider it a sacred space, to leave a little wilderness in the psyche and the heart everywhere.
Mhm.
So anyway, you know, I'm a pastor, and sometimes I can't help but give a sermon, and I apologize.
Okay. So John, are you ready to present now?
Actually, it's good to follow Judith because, I mean, for me, talking about writing poetry, many of my poems have tended to come in a flash.
Yeah.
I mean, literally one that I can recall, I can't remember which poem, but all done with my work, standing up, pushing the chair in at my desk to go up to bed and go to sleep. There's the poem. And I know if I don't pull that chair back out and write it down right now, it's not going to be there tomorrow morning.
Right.
That's more typical of my creative process. But the one I'm going to share with you is a little bit different. Sherry and I were both part of an exhibition up here in Sebastopol, Reverberations. This is the third time they've done it at the center, the Sebastopol Center for the Arts. And it's an ekphrastic poetry, art and poetry show. In this case, the art came first and then the poets second. Last time around, it was the other way around. So we were both invited to write poems based on a piece of art. And let's see if I can share this. Yeah. Can you see that? No.
Yes, yes.
Yes.
This was the piece I got. In fact, the photo was not even this good. All I saw was a couple of hunks of metal on the ground. And so I guess in talking about the flash of inspiration, another way that I might say that is that there's an image that comes to me. But in neuroscience, I think what we know is that images aren't always just visual, or they're not sometimes not even visual at all. It's a cluster of things that suddenly come together. But I didn't have that. I had just this picture of these pieces of metal lying on the ground. And I'm supposed to write a poem about it. The artist's name is Judith Shea, S-H-E-A. I knew nothing about her at the time, but she's a very well-known American sculpturist or three-dimensional artist. And a lot of her art has had to do with women's issues. She does a lot of body-sized mannequins, sometimes with heads, sometimes without. This one appears to be empty. But I started studying who she was, and one of the things I realized that she's also an art curator, and she had this one particular art exhibition that I was really impressed with, which was Western art images of portraits of women. And she showed them as they go through all the different eras that we're so familiar with in Western history. And then it comes to the 20th century and something changes. She starts looking you in the eye. And that's a very different thing that happens. So I'm getting a sense of who this woman is and what she's trying to say something about women and women's situation and women's liberation within culture. But I still don't have a grasp on this particular piece. But so I dug again and deeper and deeper, and I finally somewhere found a digital copy of an old microfilm of a newspaper article about this piece back in 1985, and it's called The Crusader. And a little commentary on it about what was this at the time. Well, this was the 80s. What was feminism doing in the 80s? Well, one of the things is that this was the decade that women forced their way into the workplace in senior positions and as executives, and they had to wear armor to do that, to take the blows. But then there came a time where they could take that armor off and still take the blows, but stand tall. And so these pieces are all swirling together. This was the same era. Carol Gilligan was talking about women finding their voice. This is what came out in the 80s. And these things all came together for me. I'm going to show you now the poem that came from that. Okay, wait a second here. There it is. And I will share that. And you see this one. Everybody see that?
Yes, we see it.
Mhm.
So, you see, to me, the creative process, particularly in old Chinese Buddhism, there are many different types of meditation. And even I think more in Zen, in the Japanese types of Buddhism, meditation is not necessarily in any way a passive project. But what you are trying to do is make room for a creative impulse to come through, to see the image, as it were. And so my intellect is always, I think, trying to do this, where I'm in this dance, waiting for this unconscious thing to come through and to recognize it. And I finally did see the image, and this is what it was: the Crusader. She lay down the armor, facing powerful blows, standing tall in her victory. She rode hard into war, trampling down, defending scorn, rising now on steady feet. She laid down her hardness, that hollow sheath, that blouse. The uniform is over. Time now for the new way, a new voice, a new gaze. The time for living begins.
Amen.
So ekphrastic poetry is a very different process for me. And it really is, for me, a collaboration between my conscious self and making way and learning how, I had to educate my conscious self to the point that I could recognize the impulse when it came through and then make room for it. And then the poem would come in a kind of flash, but it was a flash that was worked for. So
Great.
That's my contribution.
I appreciate your
Comments?
research, John, how you come up with something and then really delve into it.
I can do that. And, when we were studying Lou Salome, that's what Nietzsche said about her, is that he'd never met anyone who could take an idea and transfer it into the realm of experience the way that she could. And I understand that, because I think I can do that to some extent as well. I don't get caught in my thoughts or in the cognitive stuff. I can actually carry it into the realm of the body and the realm of experience. Thank you.
Yeah.
I love the hopeful quality of it, John.
Mm-hmm.
We are just so starved for hope right now, and that's just a beautiful expression of it.
Yeah.
John, as I was looking at the image while you were describing your experience with it, and then reading the poem, the image changed for me. And I'm wondering if it has changed for you. looking at it? Does it look the same to you now
Oh,
as it did when you first looked at it?
It doesn't. In the first case, in a very literal sense, it was just a couple hunks of metal, and I can see now, probably from just having a better picture, that actually is a blouse and a skirt. And that was the armor. But emotionally, I understand that experience because I made a decision in my life to, a long time ago, to live my life vulnerably, to put the armor down, and take the blows and step forward and to live my life that way. That's living a life of love in the world. So yes, it brings up a huge emotional response once I learned to see it in that way, that this is the putting the armor down. It's not the armor that I'm going to have to get up and put on every day. I don't know if that answers your question.
Yeah.
I want to mention the show a little bit more. So I went to the opening. So it's at the Sebastopol Center for the Arts, and you walk in and the place is like a museum. What they've done is asked art collectors from Sonoma County to lend the Sebastopol Center for the Arts famous works that they have. And so you walk in and it's just, there's a Picasso there, there's all sorts of people. And it just looks like you walk into this museum. And this piece was laid down on a table, and John still hasn't even seen the original. But when I saw the original, it was like, God, he got this so clearly. You could see the fabric in the sculpture, and it's just laid down there, and it's almost life-size. It's really powerful. And so everyone's poem is hung up, or in his case, laid down on this pedestal next to the painting. So you get the reaction of both. And on top of that, they had asked the collectors themselves what it's like to live with these works. And they wrote a little paragraph as well. So
oh, nice.
they put together this amazing show. It's up through August 10th, if anyone is in the area.
It's Sebastopol, California, for those who are listening from afar. Okay, one more, and that's...
Wait a minute, could I make a comment?
Go ahead.
About
Yeah,
John?
sure.
Because when I looked at it, that space that I now know is between the blouse and the skirt was what caught me. And it could have been, it was ambiguous. It could have been brokenness, or it could have been vulnerability. And I feel like that, for me, when I looked at the piece, was the center of the piece, but also the center of your poem. As you shared, I thought, John is an archaeologist. Everything you do is so layered. You've dived down so deep into all the works that you do, and I just appreciate that quality. It's like almost monastic contemplation.
Now that is a true.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I'd also like to comment that ability to put yourself in a vulnerable position is the converse to patriarchal thinking, where you are allowing yourself to be vulnerable and to admit that you don't know and then investigate instead of taking the high road from the very beginning in your perspective.
Thank you. Yeah.
Thank you.
That was very impressive about you, John, when I met you at that Confluence. I was so struck, because of the tensions and stuff, and how you just took everything on the chin. It was just so impressive.
Okay, so I would like to take my 5 minutes worth to just give homage to Colleen Kibert, who brought me back to art in a surprising way. I think many people get this notion that they have a creative urge at some point in their life. They get it drilled out of them in kindergarten or first grade, but then it comes back later in life when they find out that what they thought they were doing isn't working out exactly right, and they feel this urge again. And I did in 1995, and I decided I wanted to paint portraits. And what I found was that I was constantly painting the shadow of people. Somehow I could not create a sweet painting of somebody. I was always painting their shadow. And that frightened me, I guess. And so I put my paintbrushes down for quite a while, about 20 years. And there were a few other things that happened in there. But in any case, when I met Colleen, she immediately made me feel comfortable in my own skin. And I just want to share quickly her book, which you can get from bookbaby.com, Art and Spirit, which has just come out. And Colleen's book is just an incredibly sumptuous book, and I urge everyone to read it. And so my experience with this really had its inception with Colleen, in the sense that I didn't realize when I was painting the portraits that I was painting from the unconscious, and I was unconsciously painting the unconscious of the people I was painting, and that's why I kept hitting their dark spots, and so. But in Colleen's book, I started to follow Colleen's procedure, and starting with the doodle, and looking to my unconscious to inform me about what I should do. And so if you know Colleen, you know that the doodle is important. And I'm always looking to the unconscious. But what came out of this in time, and I'm going to show you three quick images of the process of one of my pieces, just to show you what I've done. But basically, I follow the procedures that Colleen outlines in her book, chapters 11 through 13 and chapter 17. And so I just want to show that, because what I've found is that for me, it's become an incredible meditation practice. My wife and I took up Tibetan Buddhism about 30 years ago, and somehow it just didn't quite click for me. I didn't know why. And I've probably said 500,000 mantras in my day and so on. And it never quite clicked. But when I started to follow this process, I found that it is an incredible meditation technique for me. And so I'm going to show you the process, which is informed by Colleen's teaching. And this is a piece that I did in March. And so you can see what we're doing. Okay, so every step of this process, I was informed by the unconscious. I didn't put a single thing on this page unless it came from my unconscious mind. I did not consciously do anything in this. So I'm going to show you the steps now. The first step is this, which is the beginning of a doodle. Okay, and which is drawing lines I know not where, and doesn't look like much at this point. And And it so happened that because choline indicates that center represents the self, I saw a man in there. And so I started to paint the man in orange. And I've later come to realize that the orange represents either me as a Dutch American and I'm a hard-headed Dutchman, or our former president. One of the two is represented. And this one, because this evil embryo started inside of him, I started to decide it was our former president. And what I noticed about this at this very early stage, and this is before the doodle is complete, I filled in the doodle a lot more than this. I realized that there's this monkey hanging off the back of his head, working on the back of his head. And so that came out almost immediately. And so that's what I got initially. Now, I want to show you the second stage of this, which is demonstrating more coloring. Okay, so in this stage, I wanted to put a contrasting color behind him, and I thought I should use some green to create a natural environment more. And what came out when I put the green in the back was the Grinch. And so this piece shows the Grinch here, and the monkey is still there. And the monkey is actually the mouth of the Grinch and the eye of the Grinch, or part of the eye of the Grinch. And you see one thing that already has come out, and that is this high priestess here came out of this piece, but still nothing much. And you definitely don't really understand anything that's going on up in here. Okay, and then I'm going to show you the next piece. This is the final piece. And this is how it finished. And here, what you see is something that is incredibly prophetic from my point of view. Okay, now let me describe one thing. Colleen describes in her discussion of collage the portions of a piece. And so she says that the lower left is the creative wellspring. So I tend to put hot colors in the creative wellspring. And the upper left is for dreams and visions, typically. And so I tend to use dark colors in dreams and visions, but dreams can sometimes be light. So I put lighter colors in there too. And she says that at the bottom, right down the middle of the bottom is obstructions. And right up the middle of the top is the ideal. And so what we see up the middle, and one other thing, the left side is the past and the right side is the future. And so right up the middle of this piece emerges an elephant looking into the past, standing on the head of a pin. There's more to it than that, but that gives you a sense of it. And you see the light of the ideal represented in this. And then in the lower right represents our tools and what we have to accomplish our mission on Earth. And the upper right represents our mission and our hope. And so here I tend to use yellow for hope and blue for wisdom. So one of our tools is wisdom. So I put that in, but in the hope, up here you see these two eyes, and this is evil being split apart by hope. And just here you see that this evil person is giving us the finger as he's sucked off into the future, whence he cannot recover. So that's what came out of my mind. And so the way I do the process is first doodle, then color the doodle, and then put this Rocky process in, which is covered by chapter 17 of Colleen's book. And that involves outlining all or a lot of the color boundaries in the piece. And this is how it emerged at the end. There's so much in this piece, you couldn't possibly talk about it all in your lifetime. But in any case, there's a lot in there. So I just want to...
It's many, thank you. It's many hours of your meditation.
Yeah, that's a whole month's meditations in that piece. Yeah.
Yes.
So
fascinating painting. It's a beautiful painting, for one. The use of color is just really wonderful. The way you go from one color to another, one area to another. I love that little light yellow part that's open in the area of hope. It's like, I'm drawn to that. And I think it's a stunning painting. Congratulations on it.
Yeah, thank you.
Yes.
It worked out, and I'm still doing it, and I'm definitely not doing it for the purpose of selling, although I think I may sell some. What I've done is, as I've done these over the months, and this is a lot of months into this now, I've framed them and given them to my 10 grandchildren and 3 daughters for their birthdays. And so far, so good. They seem to be happy with them. Okay.
It's amazing to look at. I mean, this is true of any painting, is to say, well, where did the artist, where did the artist begin? And what was the experience that the artist had doing this? We seldom look at a painting that way, but it's a very Asian way. We have our Western mind takes in the whole thing and quickly says, I like it or I don't like it. We make a judgment. We want to be entertained by it. But this other way of looking at it takes time and attention. And what happens to yellow? What is the experience of blues having? What was it like for the artist to actually do this? What was it like for you to actually do this, Skip? And when you say, none of this came from my conscious mind, it all came from the unconscious, what is that experience like for you? What is the experience that you have when you're doing this?
It's like a meditation should be. It's like, for the last 30 years, I've been looking at Buddhist meditation, and it's got me 90%, 98% of the way, but it's not quite what I need. But all of a sudden now, doing this approach, I do it early in the morning, starting at 6 a.m. every day, and I just let my hand flow out and do what it tells me to do.
Yeah.
And I mean, in some ways, these paintings can seem pedantic. Sometimes I think of it that way, but
sometimes we are pedantic.
Right. But at the same time, I find that these are have very many levels of understanding. You can't possibly finish understanding that or any of these paintings I've done. You can be across the room from them, and the color will get your attention. And then you get closer, and then you start to say, oh, there's imagery in this, which you don't see from across the room. And then you look at it closely and you say, oh my God, there's 100 images in this, or 1,000. Who can count? I can't count them. I haven't been able to count. So Diane, your comment. Diane, you had your hand up, I thought. Okay.
Hmm.
Oh,
Well, I
I'd like
want to
to put,
comment on my Japanese friends at Omoto. When I first went there and was learning about their practice, they believe that when one is doing one's art form, that one is in the highest state of the human being. That when we're painting,
definitely
when we're
feel
doing tea
that.
ceremony, it could be Aikido, which was born at Omoto in Japan. It's their martial art form. So it's when one is in that state that it's the highest state that the human being is in. And so when I asked my friend Tanaka, do you meditate? He said, well, it's okay if you want to, but it's better if you write a poem. And that for the artist, you know, when you said that the meditation, that you reach a point where you say 95% of the meditation is an important part of it, but there was still something there that you wanted to do. And I think that it is that way with those of us that are visually oriented or oriented to the artistic expression, that the poem comes out of it, the painting comes out of it.
Yeah,
And
well,
in this
still my
case,
conscious,
elaborate.
still my unconscious was telling me what to do. When I started to see imagery in that, when I started to see the head and then the little monkey on the back of the head, which I had not done consciously. When I started to see it, then I said, okay, well, I guess I have to paint that in. But my unconscious was telling me to paint that in, because otherwise I would have finished the doodle before I painted any color in. But my unconscious said, paint it in now. And
Yeah.
so I did.
Yeah.
So
Paint it in, as John says, write it now before you go to sleep.
yeah,
Or
yeah.
Judith says, pull the car over to the side of the road and catch it now, you know.
Diane, you have a question?
Forgive me. I think I was cut off, but I just want to say a good inspiration for the Rocky pieces reminds me of Celtic art. If we look at the cover of the manuscripts and how the snakes wind around, it's very orderly but chaotic at the same time, such as a Rocky. On the other hand, there's Dolly's paranoia critical activity, where he sees things in the cracks and so forth. But Celtic art might be a great connection to the Rockies. So thank you.
Yeah, definitely. And I sort of initially thought of these as pipelines or almost circuit boards. You know, but they could also be seen as snakes, as I'm painting in the
But you know, the circuit board is a wonderful metaphor, because you have to choose which ones you're going to turn on.
Yep, that's right.
And that's where the conscious mind comes in and says,
right.
You know, here's a trickster. Am I going to play with the trickster and see what it has to say, or am I going to elaborate on this feminine that's coming up out of the wellspring, the collective? Anyway, it's I love the idea of the circuit board, because we do make choices about what words we're going to use. And certainly the poets must work with this all the time.
Sure. So I just want to.
I think Maureen, does Maureen have something? Did you want to?
Yeah,
she took off. She had to leave at 11:30.
The title is The Grinch in this case. The Grinch.
Okay.
So
Wallace, I'm wondering, in the name of time, Wallace, do we have people in the chat box that are wanting to that have questions or wanting to?
There isn't anything really that needs to be interjected. Lots of wonderful responses in chatter that kind of lived on its own, but nothing that I think needs to be introduced to the to the group.
Right.
I'd just like to say, Mom, when you were talking about how we look at a painting, west versus east, the nuances and the experience of like, where did they start, and rather than just, do I like it or don't I like it? I wish that we applied that to how we choose our presidential candidates also.
Amen. Okay, so I just want to mention before I turn this over to Tim for wrapping up that tomorrow at the same time, which will be 1 p.m. Eastern Time, 10 a.m. Pacific Time, and work out your time zone wherever you are, we will be having a follow-up session. And in that session, we'll be presenting the work of some of the people who have attended our confluences, and we'll be seeking their inputs about our confluences and what has happened since they've attended. And so we look forward to that. And if you have a piece and you are in that category where you attended one of our confluences, please send your piece to me so that I can tee it up to show tomorrow during our session. And Colleen and Tim will still be our moderators tomorrow. And then our plan is that in the future, probably in September, we will be having another confluence like this, but that time we will be inviting pieces from everyone in the world. Anybody in the world who wants to participate may submit a piece for the September show. So you can send your pieces to me, and I'll try to do my best to collect them. And we'll be doing it, I think it's the second week of September, just for one day. And we're going to do this periodically, and this will be our process going forward, so that we can talk about how the unconscious informs our work and what it means to us in society. Tim.
So I kind of want to wrap this up because people are starting to drop off. We talked about maybe trying to get this limited to 90 minutes, and that's why Maureen had to go. She planned something else. But this has been a really great exchange of ideas and beautiful images and poems. I'm hoping we can keep going in this same direction. And the idea is to try to maintain the kind of intimacy of the fishbowl with a few people having an intimate conversation, and everybody else get to participate in that intimate conversation, but then comment on it at a later time. And this time we kind of took comments all the way through, but especially if we get more people, it's going to be a little bit ponderous if we don't limit the outside comments to a later time in the program. So tomorrow we'll be especially going over our thoughts and feelings about the last two confluences for the participants. And of course, we'll share the artwork. And then we want to look forward to taking this idea elsewhere. One of the things that when we met in person a couple of weeks ago at Colleen's, we talked about this beautiful idea of this being a non-centralized kind of idea, where if we start doing this, encouraging the creative work of our friends and neighbors, it might give other people ideas to do this in their own community. I'm thinking about a guy here, a friend of mine who's a psychotherapist that has teenage kids. He's trying to keep safe in the age of social media, and he and his neighbors just decided, since we all have kids, let's help each other to support each other in keeping the kids off the social media until they're old enough to handle it. And that is the kind of thing that I think we can do everywhere in the world. If there's somebody in Zimbabwe who decides this is a beautiful idea and they'd like to take it home, we can serve as a kind of model for how that would work, that we can encourage creativity wherever it pops up anywhere. And so we are not only having fun with each other and sharing fairly intimate stuff with each other, but I think we can serve as kind of a model for how other people can do this elsewhere.
Yeah.
So anything else you want to add, Colleen?
No, it's working.
It is
It's working. This is just great. Blessings.
All right. So we'll see you tomorrow at the same time.
Yes.
And anytime you can come back in the future, you're welcome. And please invite friends, anybody that you think might be interested.
And start thinking about submitting artwork for our September event. And obviously we're looking for people who we have worked with yesterday in our confluences for tomorrow, but starting in September, this is going to be open for to the public to submit work and have us talk about it, and we'll try to all participate with you.
Oh, thank you. Thank you, Tim,
Right.
Skip, Judith, Sherry, John. Thank you all very much. For very rich.
Thank you all for being part of this.
Thank you, everybody.
All right. Blessings.
And don't forget this book. I'm going to put it up here one more time. I think you can now order it off of Amazon too, right?
Thank you.
Yeah, that can come off of Amazon as well, right?
That's right. Book Baby, Amazon, and my website, Colleen Kibert Art.
Right. ColleenKibertArt.com. Okay. Thank you, everyone, and peace. Have a great weekend.